I am Brittany, 32, a marketing strategist who joined Maxwell and Partners 7 months ago with big dreams and bigger skills. Landing Retail Fusion was supposed to be my crowning achievement, transforming our agency portfolio and cementing my place on the team. Instead, I sat frozen on a video call as my manager Robert looked the client dead in the eye and said, "I apologize for the confusion. We made a mistake bringing her on." That night, after months of meticulous documentation, I forwarded one carefully preserved email. Before I tell you how I turned this betrayal around, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated at work. My journey to Maxwell and Partners started 6 years earlier. After graduating with honors from Boston University with a degree in marketing communications, I cut my teeth at smaller agencies around Chicago. I developed campaigns for local businesses, regional chains, and eventually some mid-sized national brands. My portfolio grew impressively diverse, showcasing my ability to create engaging, conversion-focused campaigns across multiple industries. When the position at Maxwell and Partners opened up, I knew it was my dream opportunity. Maxwell was not just any marketing firm. It was one of Chicago's top 3 agencies with clients ranging from Fortune 500 companies to exciting startups disrupting their industries. Their campaigns regularly won industry awards, and working there meant access to bigger budgets, innovative technologies, and career advancement opportunities I could only dream about at smaller shops. The interview process was brutally competitive. First came a phone screening, followed by a panel interview with 3 department heads. Next was a practical assignment where I had to develop a mock campaign for a fictional product. Finally, there was the executive interview with Michael Parker, the CEO, and several senior partners. At each stage, I gave everything I had, staying up late, perfecting my presentations, and rehearsing my responses to potential questions. When the call came offering me the position, I literally jumped up and down in my apartment. They had chosen me over dozens of qualified candidates, including people from top agencies in New York and LA. The salary was nearly double what I had been making, and the prestige of Maxwell and Partners would open doors throughout my career. Most of the team welcomed me warmly on my first day. Alicia from the creative department showed me around, introducing me to everyone and giving me insider tips about the office culture. Derek, another strategist who had been there for 3 years, took me to lunch and offered to help me navigate the complex approval processes for client work. But my direct manager, Robert Taylor, was different. While not overtly hostile, his welcome felt perfunctory. He handed me my first assignments without the enthusiasm one might expect when onboarding new talent. "These are smaller accounts," he explained. "Good for getting your feet wet before we throw you into the deep end." I nodded and accepted the assignments, despite having successfully managed accounts twice the size at my previous agency. The office itself was everything I had imagined a premier agency would be. Open concept with glass-walled conference rooms named after famous ad campaigns, a fully stocked kitchen, and a game room for creative breaks. The atmosphere was collaborative with impromptu brainstorming sessions happening in cozy nooks throughout the space. But underneath the progressive veneer, I quickly sensed the political undercurrents. Who got the premium accounts whose ideas made it into final presentations and who received public praise from leadership, all seemed governed by an invisible hierarchy I had yet to decipher. Despite Robert's lukewarm reception, I was determined to prove myself. I threw myself into those smaller accounts, treating each one like it was our biggest client. I worked late, researched extensively, and developed strategies that exceeded client expectations. Within 2 months, 3 of my accounts had increased their spending with us, impressed by the results of my work. The first strategy meeting I attended for one of our larger clients revealed more about my situation. Around the conference table sat Robert, 2 creative directors, an account manager, and me. I had spent the weekend researching the client and had come prepared with several innovative approaches to address their declining engagement rates. I noticed their competitor is having success with interactive social campaigns I offered when Robert asked for input. We could develop something similar but with a unique twist that aligns with their brand voice. Robert nodded dismissively. "Interesting thought, but I think we should stick with what we know works for this client." He then proceeded to outline a strategy remarkably similar to their previous campaigns, which data showed had been progressively less effective. Derek caught my eye across the table and gave a subtle shrug. After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "That was a good idea you had. Robert can be territorial with the strategies for his long-standing clients." That evening, I started a practice that would ultimately save my career. I began methodically documenting everything. Every email, every meeting note, every contribution I made, and how it was received. This was a habit I had developed at my previous job when a colleague had once taken credit for my work. Back then, having the documentation had helped set the record straight. Little did I know how crucial this habit would become at Maxwell & Partners. Retail Fusion first appeared on my radar 3 months into my time at Maxwell & Partners. I was having coffee with Tara, a former colleague who now worked in the tech sector, when she mentioned the company. "They are looking for a new marketing agency," she said casually. "Their current one is not keeping up with their growth trajectory." Retail Fusion was exactly the kind of client that could elevate my standing at Maxwell. A retail technology company that had developed an AI-powered inventory management system, they were growing rapidly and had just secured $20 million in Series B funding. Their innovative product was changing how mid-sized retailers competed with larger chains, and they were ready to scale aggressively. That night, I began researching everything about Retail Fusion. Their target market, their competitive landscape, their current marketing approaches, and their growth challenges. I studied their executives on LinkedIn, read every press release, and analyzed their social media engagement. I even signed up for their free demo to experience their product firsthand. The next morning, I mentioned the Retail Fusion lead to Robert during our weekly check-in. His response was discouraging. "We have bigger fish to fry right now," he said, barely looking up from his computer. "Besides, tech startups are notoriously demanding and often have limited budgets. Not worth the effort." I nodded, but remained unconvinced. Everything I had learned suggested Retail Fusion had both the budget and the potential to become a significant, prestigious client. More importantly, their needs aligned perfectly with the innovative data-driven approach I specialized in. Instead of abandoning the lead, I continued my research after hours. I developed a preliminary proposal outlining how Maxwell could help Retail Fusion capitalize on their recent funding and accelerate their market penetration. I created sample campaign concepts, identified potential partnerships, and compiled relevant success stories from similar clients we had served. 2 weeks later, armed with my comprehensive analysis and proposal, I requested a meeting with Michael Parker, our CEO. This was a bold move that bypassed the traditional chain of command, but I believed the opportunity was too significant to let slip through our fingers. Michael, known for valuing initiative, agreed to a 15-minute meeting that Friday afternoon. I knew those 15 minutes could make or break my standing at the agency. I prepared meticulously, practicing my pitch until I could deliver it concisely yet compellingly. When Friday came, I found not only Michael in the conference room, but also 2 senior partners, and to my surprise, Robert. His expression was a mixture of confusion and irritation at being blindsided. "Brittany has brought us an interesting lead," Michael explained to the room before turning to me. "You have the floor." For the next 12 minutes, I presented Retail Fusion, their market position, their needs, and how Maxwell was uniquely positioned to help them scale. I outlined specific strategies we could employ, potential campaign directions, and projected outcomes based on similar clients we had served. I finished by explaining my personal connection that could help us secure an initial meeting. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Michael leaned forward, clearly intrigued. "This is exactly the kind of proactive thinking we need. Tech retail is a growing sector we should be stronger in." He turned to Robert. "What do you think worth pursuing?" Robert, caught off guard but adaptable, shifted his position. "There are some interesting possibilities here. If Brittany already has a connection, we might as well explore it." "Excellent," Michael replied. "Robert, work with Brittany to develop this into a formal pitch. I want to see what you two come up with in a week." As we left the meeting, Robert placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing slightly harder than necessary. "Next time, run these things by me first before going to Michael. That is how the chain of command works here." I apologized for bypassing him, but could not help feeling a small surge of triumph. The opportunity was too good to have been dismissed, and now we were pursuing it with the CEO's explicit backing. The following week was both exciting and tense. Robert agreed to let me take the lead on developing the pitch materials, but insisted on close supervision. "I will need to approve every element before it goes into the final presentation," he said. "This needs to reflect Maxwell's established approach, not just your personal vision." I worked late every night, refining the pitch and developing comprehensive campaign concepts. Each day, I would submit my progress to Robert, who would invariably request substantial changes that often seemed designed more to assert his authority than improve the content. I carefully incorporated his feedback while preserving the core strategies I believed would win over Retail Fusion. The more I researched Retail Fusion and worked on the pitch, the more excited I became about the potential partnership. This was not just an opportunity to prove myself at Maxwell. It was a chance to work with a truly innovative company that was making a real difference for independent retailers struggling to compete in an Amazon-dominated marketplace. Their mission resonated with me personally, having grown up in a small town where family-owned businesses were the heart of the community. By the end of the week, we had a pitch that even Robert seemed genuinely enthusiastic about. Michael reviewed it and gave his approval to proceed with contacting Retail Fusion. Using my connection through Tara, we secured a pitch meeting for the following Thursday. As the meeting approached, I found myself both exhilarated and anxious. This was my chance to make a significant impact at Maxwell & Partners, but I also sensed that the dynamics with Robert had shifted. I was no longer just a new team member to be mentored. I had become something between a valuable asset and a potential threat. I continued documenting every interaction, every contribution, and every decision related to the Retail Fusion pitch, a habit that would prove invaluable in the months to come. The Retail Fusion pitch meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on Thursday at their downtown office. Our team consisted of Robert, myself, Alicia from Creative, and Derek as additional strategic support. We arrived 30 minutes early to set up and do one final review of our presentation. Retail Fusion's conference room reflected their company culture, modern but unpretentious, with motivational quotes from retail innovators adorning the walls. 4 executives filed in precisely at 10. Sarah Johnson, their CEO, Marcus Lee, head of marketing, Tanya Rodriguez, product development, and James Wilson, CFO. Their presence underscored the importance of this decision to their company. After introductions, Robert began with an overview of Maxwell & Partners, highlighting our agency's prestigious client list and award-winning campaigns. He then smoothly transitioned, and now I will hand it over to Brittany, who has developed some specific strategies for Retail Fusion. My heart raced as I took control of the presentation. This was my moment, the culmination of weeks of research and preparation. I began by demonstrating a deep understanding of their business model and the specific challenges they faced in communicating the value of their AI system to traditional retailers often skeptical of new technology. The key is not to sell them on the technology itself, I explained, but on the human outcomes it enables. Your system does not just optimize inventory, it frees up retailers to do what they love, creating personal connections with their customers. I proceeded to outline a 3-phase marketing strategy that would position Retail Fusion not as a tech company, but as a retail empowerment platform. The centerpiece was a documentary-style campaign featuring success stories from small and mid-sized retailers who had transformed their businesses using Retail Fusion's system. Throughout my presentation, I could see the executives leaning forward engaged. Sarah Johnson nodded appreciatively several times, while Marcus Lee took extensive notes. When I finished my portion, Alicia followed with creative mock-ups that brought my strategic concepts to life visually. During the Q&A session, Robert smoothly fielded questions about budget and timeline, while I addressed the more technical inquiries about targeting and campaign metrics. The chemistry between our team felt natural and complementary, giving no hint of the underlying tensions. As we packed up our materials, Sarah Johnson approached me directly. "Your understanding of the retail mindset is exactly what we have been missing with our current agency. They keep trying to sell us as a tech innovation, missing the human element completely. We left the meeting on a high note, with Robert even complimenting my performance in the elevator ride down. You connected well with them. Good job. The following Tuesday, we received the news Retail Fusion had selected Maxwell & Partners as their new agency of record, with an initial contract valued at $750,000 annually, with potential to increase as they expanded. The office erupted in celebration when Michael announced the win at our monthly all-hands meeting. This is exactly the kind of innovative client we want to be working with, he declared. Let us give a round of applause to the team that brought them in, especially Robert for leading the pitch and Brittany for identifying the opportunity and developing the core strategy. Colleagues congratulated me throughout the day, stopping by my desk to express their admiration for landing such an impressive client so early in my tenure. Derek gave me a high five, and Alicia brought me my favorite latte from the coffee shop downstairs. Robert's reaction, however, began to shift subtly, but noticeably. In the all-agency email he sent about the win, he emphasized his leadership role. I am pleased to announce that under my direction we have secured Retail Fusion as our newest client. I look forward to leading this account and implementing the strategy we presented. My name appeared only in the general acknowledgement of the pitch team at the end of the email. During the initial client onboarding meeting, Robert positioned himself between me and the Retail Fusion executives, both literally and figuratively. When Marcus Lee specifically asked for my input on implementing the documentary campaign concept, Robert interjected. Brittany provided some initial ideas during the pitch, but I have refined the approach since then, he said, proceeding to outline a modified version of my strategy that was, in my opinion, less focused and less aligned with Retail Fusion's specific needs. That evening, I added this interaction to my growing documentation file, noting the specific changes Robert had made to my original concept without consultation. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. In internal meetings, Robert would critique my ideas as inexperienced or not aligned with Maxwell's approach, yet in subsequent client presentations, versions of those same ideas would appear under his name. I began noticing my exclusion from certain email chains and meetings regarding Retail Fusion, despite being officially assigned to the account team. During one strategy session, I presented research showing that Retail Fusion's target audience responded strongly to case study content. Robert dismissed it publicly. That research methodology is flawed. We will focus on traditional promotion tactics that have proven successful for similar clients. 2 days later, he circulated a new direction memo advocating for a case study-centered approach, presented as his own insight. Documenting these incidents began to feel less like a precaution and more like a necessity. I maintained a detailed journal recording each occurrence, including dates, witnesses, and specific details of what was said and done. I also saved every email and meeting note, organizing them meticulously. One afternoon, Alicia stopped by my desk with a concerned expression. "Can we grab coffee after work?" she asked quietly. At the coffee shop around the corner, she hesitated before speaking. "I noticed what is happening with Robert. You are not the first, you know." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I had begun to suspect. "Robert has a history with female employees who show too much promise too quickly. Jessica from media planning left because of him last year. Lauren before that. He never does anything overtly inappropriate, just gradually undermines them until they either step back or leave out of frustration." This information was both disheartening and validating. At least I was not imagining things or being overly sensitive. Document everything, Alicia advised, echoing the practice I had already adopted. The critical moment came 4 months into the Retail Fusion account. Through a clerical error in the IT department, I was copied on an email that was never intended for my eyes. It was from Robert to Michael, our CEO. "Just wanted to update you on the Retail Fusion account that I brought in. The strategy I developed has been implemented successfully, and initial metrics are exceeding projections. This validates my decision to pursue this client despite initial reservations from the team." I stared at the screen in disbelief. This was a complete inversion of reality. I had identified the client champion pursuing them, despite Robert's initial dismissal, and developed the core strategy that was now succeeding. I saved that email, immediately adding it to my growing file of documentation. It would prove to be the most valuable piece of evidence in my collection. With Retail Fusion officially on board, we moved into the exciting phase of developing their first major campaign. The centerpiece would be the launch of their new Retail Fusion 2 platform, which added advanced customer behavior analytics to their existing inventory management system. This was a significant product evolution that needed an equally powerful marketing campaign. Based on the strategy that had won us the account, I developed a comprehensive campaign concept titled The Human Side of Data. It would showcase retailers who had used Retail Fusion's insights to create more personalized shopping experiences, demonstrating how technology could actually enhance human connections rather than replace them. The campaign would include documentary-style videos, interactive case studies, targeted digital advertising, and a roadshow event series in key retail markets. When I presented this concept to the internal team, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Alicia and her creative team were particularly excited about the authentic storytelling approach. This gives us so much to work with, visually she enthused. Real stores, real owners, real customers. It will feel genuine in a way that glossy tech advertising never does. I scheduled a presentation with Retail Fusion to share the concept. Marcus Lee and Sarah Johnson both attended along with their product team. Their reaction exceeded my expectations. "This is exactly what we have been trying to articulate," Sarah said, leaning forward eagerly. "Our technology is sophisticated, but the end result is deeply human. You have captured that perfectly." Marcus nodded in agreement. "The retailers we work with do not care about our algorithms. They care about connecting with their customers and competing effectively. This campaign speaks directly to that." Robert, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during my presentation, finally spoke up. "I am glad you like the direction. Of course, there are many details to refine before execution." The meeting ended with Retail Fusion giving enthusiastic approval to move forward with the concept development. As we left their office, I felt a rare moment of professional fulfillment. This was exactly why I had wanted to work at a prestigious agency like Maxwell, the opportunity to create meaningful campaigns for innovative clients who appreciated strategic thinking. That feeling was short-lived. Over the next few weeks, Robert began inserting himself more aggressively between me and the client. He rescheduled meetings when I was unavailable, held calls with Retail Fusion without informing me, and began modifying my campaign materials without consultation. The first major incident occurred when I received the revised storyboards for our documentary videos from Alicia. "These are different from what we discussed," I said, confused by the changes. Alicia looked uncomfortable. "Robert gave us new direction yesterday. He said the client wanted something more product-focused and less about the retailers." This directly contradicted everything Retail Fusion had expressed in our meetings. When I raised this with Robert, he was dismissive. The client and I had a follow-up conversation. "They felt your approach was too soft, not emphasizing the technology enough. I made adjustments accordingly." I carefully documented this interaction, along with the original storyboards and the revised versions. Something felt off about his explanation, but I had no way to verify it without potentially creating awkwardness with the client. The situation escalated when Robert began altering my strategic documents before sharing them with Retail Fusion. Key elements of the human side of data concept were gradually diluted or eliminated, entirely replaced with more traditional product-focused marketing that resembled the exact approach Retail Fusion had rejected from their previous product agency. During one particularly frustrating week, I completed a detailed content calendar for the campaign's social media and blog components, emphasizing retailer success stories and practical implementation tips. When the final version reached the client, it had been transformed into a schedule of product feature announcements and technical specifications. The most blatant credit stealing occurred during a major presentation to Retail Fusion's extended leadership team. I had prepared a comprehensive overview of the campaign strategy, complete with research findings, creative direction, and implementation timeline. The evening before the presentation, Robert informed me that he would be delivering it himself. "This is a critical meeting with their C-suite," he explained. "As the account director, I should be the one presenting." I reluctantly agreed but asked to at least attend the meeting. The next day I sat silently as Robert presented my work slide by slide, occasionally adding, "As I developed this approach," or "My strategy here was to..." Not once during the hour-long presentation did he acknowledge my contributions or even my presence in the room. The Retail Fusion executives who knew me looked confused occasionally, glancing my way with questioning expressions. After the meeting, Derek pulled me aside. "That was your work," he presented, "right? The whole thing?" I nodded, trying to maintain my professional composure. "That is messed up," he said simply. "People are noticing Brittany, not just me and Alicia." This was somewhat comforting, but it did not change the immediate reality. Robert was systematically taking credit for my work while simultaneously altering it in ways that threatened its effectiveness. The situation reached a critical point when Robert made a unilateral decision to redirect a significant portion of the campaign budget. Originally, we had allocated 60% to the documentary series and retail case studies, with the remainder split between digital advertising and the roadshow events. Without consulting me or informing the client, Robert redistributed the budget to prioritize traditional digital advertising, slashing the documentary series to just 20%. When I discovered this change in the production schedule, I confronted him directly. "This completely undermines the core strategy that Retail Fusion approved. The documentaries are the heart of the human side of data concept." "The strategy needed adjustment," he replied coolly. "The client hired Maxwell for our expertise, not to blindly follow initial concepts. My experience tells me this budget allocation will be more effective." I added this incident to my documentation file, along with the original budget proposal that Retail Fusion had enthusiastically approved. It was becoming clear that Robert was not just taking credit for my work, he was actively sabotaging the campaign strategy that had won us the account. As the campaign launch date approached, I found myself in an increasingly impossible position. My name and reputation were attached to a campaign that was morphing into something I did not believe in, yet I had little power to prevent the changes. Robert had effectively isolated me from direct client contact while continuing to present himself as the strategic mind behind the account. The day before the campaign was set to launch, Marcus Lee from Retail Fusion called me directly, bypassing Robert. "Brittany, I am confused about the changes to the documentary series. We were really excited about that being the centerpiece of the campaign." This put me in an ethical dilemma. I could either be honest about not being consulted on the changes, potentially creating client concern and internal conflict, or I could defend decisions I fundamentally disagreed with. I opted for a diplomatic middle ground. There have been some adjustments to the implementation based on production timelines and budget considerations. I am happy to review the current plan with you to address any specific concerns. Marcus sounded disappointed but accepted my explanation. After the call, I documented the conversation and added it to my growing file. Something would have to give eventually, and when it did, I wanted to be prepared. 2 weeks after the campaign launch, Retail Fusion requested a progress review meeting. The initial metrics were mixed. The traditional advertising was performing adequately, but not exceptionally, while the limited documentary content we had managed to produce was generating significant engagement and positive feedback. The meeting was scheduled as a video call with the key Retail Fusion stakeholders, Sarah Johnson, Marcus Lee, and their new CMO, David Chen, who had joined the company after our initial pitch. Robert insisted that he and I should be the only Maxwell representatives on the call, which struck me as potentially problematic given the campaign's complex components. The call began at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. After pleasantries, Marcus shared his screen showing the campaign performance dashboard. "As you can see, we are seeing good engagement with the documentary content. The first two retailer stories have exceeded our view-through rates by 40% compared to our previous video content. Sarah added, "The feedback from our sales team has been particularly positive. They are using the documentaries in their pitches, and potential clients are responding well to seeing real-world applications." I felt a surge of validation. Despite the reduced budget and scope, the core of my original strategy was proving effective. I began to outline how we could expand this aspect of the campaign based on these early results. We could accelerate production on the next 3 retailer documentaries, I suggested, and possibly reallocate some of the digital ad budget to promote the existing content to a wider audience. David, the new CMO, looked confused. I thought the documentary series was always meant to be limited. The materials I reviewed emphasized traditional digital advertising as the primary channel. Before I could clarify, Robert interjected. There appears to be some confusion about the campaign strategy. He cleared his throat and delivered the words that would forever change the course of my career. "I apologize for the confusion. We made a mistake bringing her onto this account." Time seemed to stop. The video call continued, but I felt as if I was suddenly watching it from a great distance. My face remained professionally composed through sheer force of will, but inside my thoughts raced chaotically. Did he really just say that? In front of the client, about me? The silence that followed was excruciating. Sarah and Marcus exchanged uncomfortable glances. David, new to the relationship, looked merely perplexed. No one seemed to know how to respond to such an unprofessional statement. Robert continued as if he had said nothing extraordinary. "What I mean is that the original strategy needed significant revision based on industry best practices. The documentary approach was always intended as a supplementary element, not the core of the campaign. I have been working to correct course." I felt my hands trembling beneath the desk out of view of the camera. My throat had gone completely dry. Every professional instinct screamed at me to defend myself, to remind everyone that the documentary-centered approach had been central to winning the account in the first place. But doing so would only create an awkward confrontation that would make the client even more uncomfortable. So I remained silent, focusing on maintaining a neutral expression while my stomach twisted into knots. I managed to contribute appropriately to the remainder of the meeting, discussing metrics and next steps as if Robert had not just publicly undermined my entire professional standing. When the call finally ended, Robert turned to me with an expression that bordered on smug. "That could have gone better. We need to get everyone aligned on the actual strategy moving forward." I nodded mechanically, gathering my materials and returning to my desk without trusting myself to speak. Colleagues I passed in the hallway must have noticed something was wrong from my expression, but I could not bring myself to explain what had just occurred. At my desk, I sat motionless, staring at my computer screen while processing the magnitude of what had happened. This was not just another instance of Robert taking credit or making changes without consultation. This was a direct public statement to our most important new client that I was a mistake, that my contributions were not just unwelcome, but actively harmful. Alicia stopped by my desk, concern evident on her face. "Are you okay? You look like you have seen a ghost." "Robert just told Retail Fusion they made a mistake putting me on the account." I said the words sounding surreal as I spoke them. Her eyes widened. "He said that during the client call, those exact words." I nodded, the reality of the situation sinking in deeper with each passing minute. This was no longer about credit or strategic differences. This was my career, my reputation, my future at Maxwell and Partners, and potentially in the industry as a whole. If Robert's narrative prevailed, I would be branded as the strategist who needed to be apologized for to clients. For the remainder of the workday, I went through the motions, responding to emails and completing necessary tasks while my mind raced with possible responses to Robert's betrayal. I could confront him directly, but that would likely lead nowhere productive. I could go to HR, but without documentation of the call, it would be my word against his. I could resign immediately, but that would only reinforce his narrative that I was the problem. As 5:30 approached, I made a decision. This situation called for strategic thinking, the very skill I had built my career on. Robert had made a critical error in his campaign to undermine me. He had become overconfident, escalating from behind-the-scenes manipulation to public sabotage. And in doing so, he had crossed a line that made my next steps clear. I gathered my things and left the office without saying goodbye to anyone. The commute home on the L train passed in a blur of jumbled thoughts and emotions. Anger, humiliation, anxiety, and beneath it all, a steely determination that this would not be how my story at Maxwell and Partners ended. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. For the next 3 hours, I methodically reviewed the extensive documentation I had been collecting for 5 months. Every email, every meeting note, every revised document that showed the evolution of the retail fusion strategy and how Robert had systematically undermined it while taking credit for the original concept. Most critically, I reread the email that Robert had never intended me to see, where he claimed to Michael that he had brought in the retail fusion account and developed the strategy despite initial reservations from the team. This single piece of evidence directly contradicted the narrative he had been crafting and revealed his willingness to lie to the CEO about his contributions. By 11 p.m., my hands had stopped shaking. In their place was a calm clarity about what needed to be done. I composed a new email addressed to Michael Parker, our CEO, with copies to the head of HR and the Retail Fusion executive team. The subject line was simple: Retail Fusion Campaign Clarification of Strategy and Contributions. In the email, I professionally and factually outlined the development of the Retail Fusion relationship from my initial identification of the opportunity through the pitch process and campaign development. I detailed the strategic approach that had won the client and how it had been gradually altered without client consultation. I explained the results of the campaign components that remained true to the original strategy versus those that had been changed. I attached key documentation, including the original pitch materials, client approvals, and the subsequent changes made without my input. And finally, I included Robert's email to Michael, taking credit for bringing in the account, followed by a transcript of his statement from that day's call. My finger hovered over the send button as a moment of doubt crept in. Was this career suicide? Would I be seen as difficult? Not a team player. Someone who could not handle workplace challenges professionally. Then I remembered Robert's words. We made a mistake bringing her on. He had not hesitated to publicly undermine me. Why should I hesitate to defend myself with the truth? I clicked send, then shut my laptop. Sleep would be impossible, but I needed to at least try to rest before facing whatever tomorrow would bring. I had just taken the biggest professional risk of my career, and there was no going back. The night after sending the email was one of the longest of my life. I alternated between bouts of anxious pacing and sitting motionless, replaying the events of the past 5 months and questioning my decision. Had I overreacted? Should I have tried to resolve the situation with Robert directly one more time? Would this make me unhireable at other agencies if it backfired? By morning, I had barely slept but felt oddly calm. Whatever happened next, I had stood up for myself and for the truth. I showered dressed in one of my most professional outfits, a navy blue suit that always gave me confidence, and headed to the office earlier than usual. When I arrived at 7:30, the office was mostly empty, just a few early risers getting a head start on the day. I settled at my desk and began working on other client projects, determined to maintain normalcy despite the turmoil. At 8:45, my phone rang. It was Michelle from Executive Administration. Brittany, Michael would like to see you in his office at 9. Her tone gave nothing away about the nature of the meeting. Thank you, I will be there, I replied, my heart immediately racing despite my outward calm. The next 15 minutes passed with excruciating slowness. I organized my thoughts, deciding to let Michael lead the conversation, rather than launching into defensive explanations immediately. At precisely 9, I knocked on the CEO's door. Come in, Michael called. When I entered, I found not just Michael waiting, but also Patricia from HR, and to my surprise, Robert. He sat stiffly in one of the chairs facing Michael's desk, his expression a mixture of anger and defensiveness. "Good morning, Brittany," Michael said, his tone serious but not unfriendly. "Please have a seat. We have some important matters to discuss regarding your email last night." I took the remaining chair, maintaining a composed expression despite the tension radiating through the room. "I have reviewed the materials you sent," Michael continued. "Patricia and I have also had a preliminary conversation with Robert this morning. Before we go further, I want to give you the opportunity to verbally summarize your perspective on the situation." I took a deep breath. "Thank you, Michael. As detailed in my email, I identified Retail Fusion as a potential client and developed the strategy that won the account. Over the past several months, I have been gradually excluded from client communications while the approved strategy was altered without consultation. This culminated yesterday when Robert told the client that bringing me onto the account was a mistake." Robert immediately interjected. "That is a complete mischaracterization of what I said. I was referring to confusion in the strategy implementation, not to Brittany personally." Michael held up a hand to stop him. "I have the transcript from Brittany's notes, Robert. The words are quite clear. We will get to your response in a moment." He turned back to me. "Please continue." I outlined the key events chronologically, referring to specific documents I had included in my email. I emphasized that my concern was not just personal, but extended to the client relationship and campaign effectiveness. The documentary content that survived the budget reallocation is outperforming other elements by 40%, validating the original strategy approved by Retail Fusion. When I finished, Michael turned to Robert. "Your response." Robert shifted uncomfortably before launching into his defense. "Brittany is relatively new to the agency and inexperienced with our processes. Yes, she brought the Retail Fusion lead to our attention, but I refined her initial ideas into a workable strategy aligned with Maxwell's approach. The changes I made to the campaign were necessary professional adjustments based on my years of experience." He turned to me, his expression hardening. "As for yesterday's call, Brittany is overreacting to a comment taken out of context during a difficult client conversation. This seems to be part of a pattern of sensitivity to routine feedback." Patricia from HR spoke up. "Robert, can you explain the email to Michael where you claim to have brought in the Retail Fusion account despite team reservations? That seems to directly contradict what you just said and the pitch documentation we have reviewed." Robert's face flushed slightly. "That was simply shorthand for the account I was directing. In the context of updating the CEO, such minor details about who initially identified the lead seemed unnecessary." Michael's expression remained neutral, but his tone grew more pointed. "Accuracy in internal communications is not a minor detail, Robert, especially when it concerns credit for a major new account." The questioning continued for nearly an hour, with Patricia and Michael methodically working through the documentation I had provided. Robert's explanations grew increasingly defensive and contradictory as they highlighted discrepancies between his statements and the written evidence. Finally, Michael leaned back in his chair. "I think we have covered enough ground for now. Patricia will continue investigating this matter thoroughly, including speaking with the creative team members involved and potentially the client if necessary." He turned to Robert. "While this investigation proceeds, you will be placed on administrative leave with pay. Please work with IT to transition your current projects appropriately before leaving today." Robert's face went pale. "This is completely unnecessary. I have been with Maxwell for 8 years. This is one disgruntled employee's word against my established record." "This is not just about one person's word," Michael replied firmly. "The documentation speaks for itself, particularly the discrepancies between client-approved strategies and implemented campaigns. We take these matters very seriously, Robert. This is standard procedure." Robert stood abruptly, straightening his jacket with jerky movements. "Fine. But this is not over." He left without another word, closing the door with slightly more force than necessary. Once he was gone, Michael turned to me. "Brittany, thank you for bringing this to my attention. It took courage to document and report these issues, especially as a relatively new team member." Patricia nodded in agreement. We will need to speak with you again as the investigation proceeds, but for now, please continue with your regular responsibilities. We ask that you maintain confidentiality about this matter while it is under review." I left the meeting feeling simultaneously relieved and anxious. Robert had been temporarily removed, but his parting words suggested he would not accept the situation quietly. And while Michael and Patricia had seemed receptive to my evidence, the investigation was just beginning. Throughout the day, rumors spread about Robert's sudden absence. Alicia found me at the coffee machine, her voice low. "Is it true Robert is on leave because of what happened with you and Retail Fusion?" I maintained the confidentiality I had promised. "I cannot discuss the details, but yes, there is an investigation happening regarding the Retail Fusion account." By late afternoon, Michael called me back to his office. "I have spoken directly with Sarah Johnson at Retail Fusion," he said without preamble. "She confirmed your account of yesterday's call and expressed concern about the strategic changes that have been implemented without their explicit approval." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I would like you to prepare a presentation for Retail Fusion, outlining a return to the original documentary-centered strategy, with adjustments based on the performance data we now have. Can you have that ready by tomorrow afternoon?" "Absolutely," I replied, trying to contain my relief and vindication. "I have already been analyzing the current metrics and have several recommendations prepared." "Good," Michael nodded. "You will lead that call with me joining to personally apologize for the confusion and reaffirm our commitment to their success." As I worked late into the evening preparing the presentation, I reflected on the rapid reversal of fortune. Just 24 hours earlier, I had sat frozen as my manager publicly undermined me. Now, I was being asked to reassume leadership of our most exciting new account. The situation was far from resolved, but for the first time in months, I felt like my work and contributions were being recognized. The investigation into Robert's conduct continued for 2 weeks. During that time, I resumed direct management of the Retail Fusion account with Michael's full support. Our call to reset the strategy had gone remarkably well, with Sarah and Marcus expressing relief that we were returning to the original vision that had won them over. We selected Maxwell & Partners largely because of that strategy, Sarah had explained. When it began changing, we questioned whether we had made the right choice. With Robert's restrictive budget allocations removed, we accelerated production on the remaining retailer documentaries. The creative team, led by Alicia, threw themselves enthusiastically into the project, clearly relieved to be working on the original concept they had found so inspiring. 3 weeks after the fateful call, Michael requested another meeting with me. This time, only Patricia from HR joined us. "The investigation is complete," Michael began. "After interviewing multiple team members and reviewing all documentation, we have determined that Robert engaged in a pattern of inappropriate behavior, including taking credit for your work, making unauthorized strategic changes, and deliberately excluding you from client communications," Patricia added. "We also found similar patterns in his interactions with other female employees over the past several years, which unfortunately were never formally reported or documented as thoroughly as you did." As a result, Michael continued Robert's employment with Maxwell & Partners has been terminated effective immediately. He was informed this morning. I nodded, processing the news. While I had expected some disciplinary action, termination of a senior manager was a more definitive outcome than I had anticipated. "Additionally," Michael said, leaning forward, "I want to offer you a formal apology on behalf of Maxwell & Partners. We failed to provide the supportive, equitable work environment we pride ourselves on. The fact that this situation progressed as far as it did reflects weaknesses in our management oversight and culture that we are committed to addressing." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely moved by the sincerity of his apology. "Now let us talk about your future here," Michael continued, his expression brightening. "I would like to offer you the position of Account Director for Retail Fusion, reporting directly to me until we restructure the department. Your strategic vision and client relationship skills have proven exceptional, and this promotion comes with appropriate compensation adjustments." The offer took me by surprise. I had hoped for recognition and the chance to properly implement my strategy, but a direct promotion to account director was beyond my expectations. I would be honored to accept, I replied. Excellent, Michael smiled. One more thing. I would like you to take a leadership role in our newly formed mentorship program for junior female employees. Your experience, unfortunately, is not unique in this industry, and your approach to handling it was exemplary. Others could benefit from your guidance. In the months that followed, significant changes took place at Maxwell and Partners. The Retail Fusion campaign flourished under the restored strategy, earning industry recognition and exceeding client targets by 35%. The documentary series in particular won a prestigious industry award for innovative B2B marketing. Beyond the campaign's success, Maxwell implemented new protocols for project attribution and credit, ensuring that contributions were accurately recognized, regardless of seniority or position. The mentorship program expanded, creating support networks that empowered employees to address issues before they escalated to the level I had experienced. On a personal level, the experience transformed me in ways I had not anticipated. The confidence I gained from standing up for myself professionally carried over into all aspects of my work. I became known not just for my strategic thinking, but for my integrity and willingness to advocate for what I believed was right. Most importantly, I developed a deeper understanding of the power of documentation and professional self-advocacy. What had begun as a simple habit of recording my contributions had ultimately saved my career and led to positive institutional change. 6 months after the fateful client call, I had lunch with Alicia, who had become a close friend through the ordeal. "You know what is amazing?" she said, stirring her iced tea thoughtfully. 3 other women have come forward with similar experiences since Robert left. None of them had your documentation, but together with your case, it created a pattern that could not be ignored. "I wish they had not gone through that," I replied. "True, but your example showed them and others that speaking up with evidence can lead to real change, not just career suicide, as so many fear." As I reflect on this challenging chapter of my career, the lesson I take forward is this. I learned that documenting your work is not just about covering yourself, it is about honoring your contributions. The hardest battles often lead to the most meaningful victories, not just for yourself, but for those who will follow in your footsteps. Sometimes the most professional response to unprofessional behavior is simply forwarding one carefully preserved email that speaks the truth that others have tried to silence. Have you ever experienced someone taking credit for your work or trying to undermine you professionally? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, your work deserves recognition, and sometimes standing up for yourself changes not just your own situation, but the environment for everyone. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always find the courage to advocate for yourself with both grace and determination.